Today on the show, we have a fantastic interview with Mr. Mike Perna of Inroads Ministries and how he recommends churches to get involved with gaming. We'll get to all of that right after this.
Hey guys, this is Ashley Cox from Fangirling Over Jesus. At FOJ, we believe in hope and light in the darkness and that you are not alone. We seek to unite and celebrate the intersection of the gospel and our favorite fandoms, and we get to do this through our social media, our podcast devotional, and our cosplay and fashion. And you can find links to all of that through our website, www.fangirlingoverjesus.com, through our social media at Fangirlingoverjesus, wherever you get your podcasts, and on Etsy. See you online.
And lead me on to your kingdom come, surrendering, let your work be done. My life I give for the glory of your Son.
This week, we have an interview with Mike Perna of Inroads Ministries, and we had a blast on the interview. To quote their website, Inroads Ministries exist to provide content and services that promote fellowship through creative play in order to empower individuals, churches, and community groups to use gaming to share the gospel and develop disciples through meaningful relationships. And but before we get to the interview, I do want to share just a couple of scriptures that came to mind when I read the description of what Inroads Ministries is really doing, especially that idea of discipleship and relationships. Matthew 28:19-20. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. And Matthew 4:19-20. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. Now, let's get right into our interview with Mr. Mike Perna. It is great to have Mr. Mike Perna with us today of Inroads Ministries and the Bard and Bible podcast and a few other things that you do as well.
I've been dubbed by the people at the guys at the Geek at Arms podcast, dubbed me the Archduke of Internet Nerd Ministry. Mostly they did that because of the fact that if you travel around certain circles, I'm either on as a guest, I'm doing the thing, I'm mentioned by one of them at some point or another. I get around.
Yes, you do. And actually I ran into your name a year or so ago, maybe a little more, when I was listening to the Saving the Game podcast.
Hashtag every 33.
Yes. You were the guest every 33 episodes, and I'm disappointed that they disbanded the podcast. I understand why.
That's
I can appreciate it.
Yeah, that's my thing too. Having talked to most of them since then, and specifically talked to a handful of them about that. It's one of those things where, I'm personally sad that it's not going to happen, that content's not going to be there. But if knowing what I know, and I can't divulge because it's spoken in private, knowing what I know, I would be telling them to stop if they weren't. Like, sometimes you need to just take care of yourself and you need to do what you need to do. So
yes,
I'm sad, but
I'm not personal friends with any of them. I don't know all the ins and outs. I was disappointed because I had finally just started getting into their podcast and then it ended. So I decided to go back and listen to all of them. So I managed to hear all of your episodes, every 33, as you say. and I really enjoyed hearing about what you were doing, and I'm working on this series of episodes specifically about role playing and how that works and what it's like and
Mhm.
how Christians should be or could be involved in that. And I know that's part of what Inroads does. Can you tell me a little bit more about Inroads and kind of what it is?
The overall of the organization is that we are a 501c3 organization. We're a nonprofit that works with church and community groups to help them build relationships that demonstrate the love of God across the gaming table. So that's board games, that's tabletop pen and paper role playing games. And at this point, all the variations thereon, because it's getting harder and harder to make hard lines between these things, because it's like what constitutes this type of game versus another type of game is designers are doing awesome things, and it's just making categorization harder. But that's a lot of what we end up doing. Our goal is often like we'll run events ourselves. We do go to conventions ourselves, but ultimately our goal is to provide articles, materials, training, as it were, mostly consultation because of geographical reasons. But when it's possible, we actually go and do trainings and just help churches primarily, and again, community groups too, especially libraries. We love working with libraries on how to use this stuff to impact their communities, because there's something that's absolutely beautiful that happens when you play games together, when you play it all together, but especially when you play games together, you see a lot about yourself, about the other people at the table. And yeah, it's just an amazing thing that God has continued to do just really cool stuff with over the years.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that. So, if you were talking to a church for the first time, and let's say they've got a couple people who are into role playing games, they've done some things, or they're into board games because you guys do some of both, correct?
We do as much as possible in both realms. Yes.
Okay, so they have some people that have some interest, and those people want to do something more than just hang out with some of their friends and play games. They want to be more involved. Where would you recommend they start? What kind of things do you talk to them about?
The first thing I always do is I always ask what their intention is. Because what their intention is will literally direct the things that they do. Sometimes it is just we want to increase fellowship, have our people experience Sabbath because they're all just stressed out and just going nuts. In that case, I'm like, literally, you don't need to do anything more. You are doing the thing to accomplish that goal.
Just go play some games.
Just go play. You're fine. You don't need to have any kind of check mark that says you're officially doing good work. You're doing good work. Go have fun. But there's also the concept of, do they want to have this be kind of an outreach, a relationship outreach kind of thing? And in that regard, a lot of it ends up being like things like we espouse what we call the no preaching rule, which is really fun when people who are like, how do you share Jesus with people? I go, the no preaching rule is the primary way we do that. Really gets some weird looks. But the no preaching rule was one of the first things we established as a ministry. And we're like, we've all been to those events where it's like, come see this sports person who's also going to spend 20 minutes talking about Jesus and nothing about sports. Come play these games. But in the middle of it, we're going to tell you to stop climbing on that cool inflatable, slide because we want you to hear about Jesus for 20 minutes. Come do X. And in very fine print, we're going to also have 20 minutes of Jesus. And that turns the gospel into a timeshare sales pitch. And where you're tricking people to hear about Jesus. And I mean,
it can feel kind of a little bit like a bait and switch.
It feels super bait and switch. We've come to an age, at least here in the US, which is where we are primarily. We've come to an age where people haven't not heard the story of Jesus. Like, I'm sure there are people out there who might have not heard it, but I'm pretty sure most people have heard it. What the problem is that they've heard it poorly, or they've heard it as a sales pitch or something like that. And so what we find is a lot of people who don't know Jesus come to our events thinking that we're going to do the sales pitch, thinking they're going to get hit over the head with Jesus, thinking that, they're going to be welcomed up until the point where they say something contrary to what we would hold as our beliefs, and then we're going to want them out and gone. And they come with a lot of bad baggage from what's happened to them in the past. And so we're like, no, dude, like, we told you we're just here to play games. We literally just want to play games with you. And the big important thing there, because I get people who hear me say that and they get very upset with me that, like, how do you not get to the gospel? And I'm like, I want them to know God. And yes, that is, making that profession of faith. I do want them to know. If I believe what I believe, I do. Of course, I want them to get to that. But I want them to see it as an outpouring of who I am, what I know, who I know. And I don't want it to feel like I'm just listening to what you're saying to get to the Jesus moment. I want them to feel listened to, heard, seen, as part of an understanding that they are an image bearer of God, and that Christ died for them too. I want them to see what knowing God has meant to me, rather than just getting them to Jesus. And so that's why we don't manufacture God moments. But if God is really sovereign, we don't feel we have to manufacture it. If we're honestly sharing about our life, and our life is found in Jesus, then we don't have to put him there. He's there. And
absolutely.
And we're not the kind of person who says that you don't need to use words to share Jesus. You do. You do need to eventually get to words. But again, those words can come from a very natural place.
Yes.
Those words can be like you can come to game night and be like, man, I'm really not feeling it. I'm really struggling. I've been praying hard, but I'm just not getting an answer, and I don't get it. Like, that is a very natural expression. That's a very, or maybe you can just like I feel really like God really answered this prayer. I've been looking for this for a while. But these are all natural expressions. These are not, I'm trying to convince you that God is real. This is me saying, I know God is real. I am seeing this in my life, or I'm struggling with this, or something is changing and is becoming awesome, or it's just there in my existence. So that's why I say, go about this to play and to get to know people, if that's your goal. Let God be God. You don't have to manufacture it. And what you find out when you let God be God is that sometimes God's going to be like, no, you need to tell them about me right now. Yes. Sometimes that's happened. I've had that moment where I'm talking to somebody and God's like, seriously, you need to tell them, like, right now. Like, I brought him here for this, do this. But most of the time what I found is that it's something that you have to be willing to put in the time to demonstrate, to really care about them. And the thing that is the hardest part when you're doing the evangelism focus is you have to be willing to care about them, whether they come to Christ or not.
Yes.
That you have to go into this understanding that my job is care. And embodying Christ to this person. Let God handle the rest. And then the other aspect of what we do is that sometimes people come to us with discipleship, and they want that to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. And even then, if that's the goal, you're already talking with people who love God and want to know God deeper. So you can be a little more upfront, because the intentionality there is that
everybody knows that's why you're there.
That's why you're there. And so even in that case, I try to like dial it back. I go, don't try to blend that. Don't try to like manufacture the lesson in your role play session. Like, don't get me wrong. I steal from Bible stories all the time for plot hooks. I definitely have morality as part of the discussion of my role play. But I don't manufacture that. I do that not to get a lesson. I do that because I think the story is fascinating. It plays off of the characters involved. It gets people thinking and talking. That's why I do it, not to frame the lesson that's going to happen.
Yeah, this is actually something in preaching that I always recommend. It's like we don't manufacture the situation to match your premise. Mm-hmm. Find something in your life that has happened,
right,
that actually fits.
Right.
Don't borrow other people's stories.
Well, yeah, and even if you do, make sure that it comes from a place. Like, not don't just steal a story because it's a good story that fits the point. Like, do that because that story hit you and impacted you, and
Yes.
you're speaking from that story, not just to give the role playing thing. It's a difference between somebody who literally just reads word for word the box text in the module versus somebody who has seen that box text, takes what that box text is saying, fits it to the characters and the situation that they're in. That's the difference. You can just read that and you go, that was nice. Or it could really take that and let it be something and roll around in your head, really asking God what that is, and then have it flow out of you after it's been through you. Whole different ballgame.
Well, talk to me. How did you get involved in role playing games specifically?
I started out with role playing as a teenager, but like many teenagers who start role playing, I wasn't good at it. I vaguely remember it. It was a small group and we barely did anything properly. Like I've read the rules for second edition and 3.5 and the stuff that I did when I was a teenager. And I'm like, man, we didn't do any of this. Because I don't know if you know this, those books can be expensive.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so what happens then, and what I still tell people to try and do now, one person buys the books and y'all just throw money at that one person to cover the expense of the books. So a lot of us were just playing going, okay, sure, that's the rule. Let's do that. To really get into role playing as I got, in earnest and really built off of that to where I am now, which is, not even neck deep. We're completely under the water here. That happened after I got done with seminary and I came home.
Okay.
And a buddy of mine was like, hey, we need a fourth for a D&D game that we want to play. You know some of the people playing, you don't know some of the other guys, but we'd really like it if you came in and played. And I said, okay. And then proceeded to play with those guys for the next 10 years.
Wow.
Many of those guys who got married while we were playing that, I performed their wedding. Not, I would like to say that a lot of them are like not people of faith would be an understatement. But like all of them knew that if they had like a deep question about God or faith, or they just knew they needed somebody to talk to, they all knew they could come to me by the time we were done. Because we spent like once a month, we hung out on Saturday for like 8 hours, rolling dice, even though it was 4th edition, which is probably my least favorite edition of D&D. we were still like, we were having an amazing time together playing these games and being silly together. And 10 years, you hang out with somebody for 10 years. That's not a small amount of time. And you get to learn so much about each other and you're literally watching each other grow too. I'm not the same person I was when I first came out of seminary. So, we're growing together. We're experiencing these things together because if there's one thing that I'll tell people is that the reason that you do this stuff at the table is because of all the benefits that happen when you leave that table. Yeah, the games are awesome. Board games, role-playing games. I have a bookshelf full of role-playing game books. I have number of bookshelves full of board games. They're awesome. I love them. I could spend long stretches of time explaining why I like each one, why I like one better than the other, what I wish they would have done with it. I could do for days. But ultimately, it's the people that you're playing with that make the games awesome. The games themselves are just cardboard and paper. It's the game. It's the people that you're playing. It's the experience of playing them.
Now, I know there are lots of different games out there. There's lots of different game mechanics, lots of different systems.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of games are built on top of some other system. Do you think there is one or two systems or game mechanics that you think bring people closer together community-wise than some of the others, maybe? I know, because I know some systems are much more crunchy. You know,
Oh, yeah.
They're really heavy, and then there are these systems that are like super light that have almost no rules at all.
And there's a paradigm in between those.
Yes, and it just yeah, insane amounts of different things in between. Do you think is one that comes to your mind that you think, this one really helps people connect relationally better than some of the others?
I have an opinion about that. I can't speak with any kind of experience because of the fact that, and this is something that frustrates some people when I talk to them about this, and it's why I say that I do consulting and I ask a lot of questions when people want to do this. It's because I don't know of one that fit. I can't say there's a blanket. This is what works. This is the best thing you do, because it all depends on the people that you're playing with, what they want, what they're expecting. Because like if I'm going with a whole bunch, if I roll into a room and they're like, this is a room full of engineers and mathematicians, D&D and Pathfinder it is, because they love, they want to have that crunch, like, oh, I can do this, and if I take this feat and do this, and here's this other splat book that I can, if you let me bring this in, that lets me do this. Like people who want to do that crunch, yes, you dive into that crunch, you give them what they're going to connect with. There are some people who are like, I just want to reenact the Lord of the Rings with my buddies on the weekend. Don't give them something that is super mathy. Or if you want to, if they come in saying, I want to play D&D because D&D is the Kleenex of role-playing games, do not feel bad about like let's not talk about grapple rules. We're not caring about that, because even people who play this game for years don't know how to do grapple correctly. Just there's no set mechanic that's going to be like, this is how you need to step forward, because it just comes from talking to the people who want to play and what they want to get out of it. I'll say things like, do you want to be superheroes, either in the literal or figurative sense? Like you want to roll up and take your axe and decapitate a dragon? Okay, we're going to do this system. Do you want to have intense conversations with your players and NPCs and do intrigue and whatever? Let's not do that math one, because that math one is just going to get in the way of you doing that. If that's your priority, let's do this system, because this system focuses more on that. It all comes down to what you're looking for. If you want my opinion, I am an avid proponent of what's called the Cypher system from Monty Cook Games, because I think they do a really good job of splitting the difference. There is math, there is crunch, but like, you don't need a fistful of dice. You need a D20. The person running the game doesn't roll. It's an amazing blessing for somebody who loves improv gaming but is really bad at it, because you don't need a stat block. You just be like, okay, you need to beat a 15. Like that's it's amazing. So like I like what they've done as far as mechanics wise, because again, it splits the difference. It has a little bit of crunch for the people who want to do the math, and the people who don't want to do the math just know they need to beat a 15. You're fine. Or beat a 10 or beat a whatever. So it does a good job of that. It all breaks down to, what do your people want to accomplish, or what do they want to experience is a better word, in this game.
Gotcha. Well, you said something interesting just now. You mentioned improv gaming.
Yes.
I have listeners from around the world, literally, and all sorts of different, followings, what they're into. So I'm sure some of them are role players, and probably some of them aren't. When you say improv role playing games, what do you mean there?
It all depends on how much work the person running the game did before they sat down at that table. There are some people who will come in with like, and trust me, if you've ever watched Critical Role or anything that shows up on the internet in an actual play, where they have the
actual plays on YouTube, yeah,
where they have these elaborate like terrain setups, and everybody has a mini, and they make sure they have everything for them. There was a lot of setup going into that session. Now, granted, that person will still have to do some improvisational stuff, because players are players and players are agents of chaos. But
Yes, they are.
if you want things to go the way you want them to go, write a book, don't play a game. Because players will no matter how much you think you've prepared, the players will find that one thing you didn't think of.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I'm pretty sure the guy in charge of my game wasn't really prepared for me just to yank somebody off the boat as I was getting on.
Yeah. So that kind of action, when the player looks at you and says, I want to do this. Now, as the dungeon master, game master, whatever term you use for the person running the game, you have the authority to just say, that doesn't happen, move on. but that's not fun. Like that, you want people to come up with these ludicrous, crazy things.
Yes.
And so in that, you have to improv that. You're improvising. You did not plan for this to occur. And so suddenly you're like, okay, so now we're doing this other thing. And so now all of a sudden your head is filled with, what does this look like? Like, what did I plan for over here that now suddenly is over here? Who, this character, they just killed this character, and this character was going to lead them on a 3-session arc. Now who's the person who's going to fill that role? Like who can we bring in now? Because they just killed that guy. So, and it all comes down to what degree you're doing that. And, some people are super planners. They hate improv and will straight up tell you, I didn't plan on you to do that. You need to give me a minute to restructure. Then there are other people who go the almost exact opposite way, where they have story beats and nothing else. They have nothing written down as far as characters. There's a podcast that I love. It's not the most family friendly, trust me, but if you don't mind that, Fear the Boot. They've been doing this for ages.
Familiar with them, yes.
Yeah, Fear the Boot. One of the guys on there, Chad is infamous for just being an incredibly improvisational GM, to the point where he'll look at his players and go, what was the name of that guy again? Or he will strictly just not even care about this stuff, and he'll be honest about it. He's like yeah, you do this because I can't be asked to remember what the name of that place, or what that was, how many the stats on that guy or whatever. Did you have that weapon last time? I don't care. Sure, you have it now. Whatever. So, and you have everybody in between there,
and that's okay, right?
And that's fine. Again, it comes down
fine.
It comes down to what the players at that table want. Like, if you want a super structured, point A to point B to point C, I want to know about point Q that you've hidden under here. If you want that, and you come up with somebody who's improvising this on the fly, that's going to infuriate you. But likewise, there are times when people are the GM's flipping through notes to get to the important piece of information that they're giving you, and everyone's like, man, we're just sitting here. Why can't we just play? And so again, it all comes down to what people are expecting.
Great. Well, if you ran into, let's say 4 people came up to you and said, we've never role played before. Mm-hmm. We've never even looked at a role-playing rule book before, but we want to do something. Is there some place you would point them to first?
One of the first questions I've asked people lately, because of the fact that actual plays are not only becoming a thing that exists, but people care about them. Again, I literally have on my phone right now the final episode of campaign 2 for Critical Role. It's a 7-hour session. I can't wait to listen to it. So more and more people know, again, D&D is the Kleenex of role-playing games. They're like, oh, we want to play D&D. We want to try this. I go, do you want to play D&D, or do you just want to try role-playing? And the reason I do that is because D&D, let's face it, a lot of us grew up on it. It's intense for somebody who goes from nothing to role-playing. It's a lot of math. It's a lot of weirdness. It's a lot of, figuring stuff out and what can I do, what can't I do.
Yeah, so I'm actually just now getting into D&D, Dungeons and Dragons,
Mhm.
because I grew up on Champions, and which is a superhero role-playing game, and
Mhm.
the Robotech role-playing game, which is based on a cartoon, a sci-fi cartoon. And then in college I did GURPS, which was kind of this generic weird role-playing game that you could pretty much
Well,
take
yeah,
anywhere.
GURPS literally stands for generic role playing system.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. So I'll ask, like, do you want the D&D experience? Because if you want the D&D experience, I'll roll that for you. Like we'll talk about that. We'll have a session where we do nothing but talk about what your characters are like, because you're gonna want that. Because if you're going in blind, you're gonna make terrible characters.
Yes.
That may or may not want to kill each other. I always love it when you play with new role players and they're like, I'm going to roll a paladin. I'm going to roll a necromancer. Oh boy.
Detect evil. Wait, why does it keep pointing at him?
Can we talk about Bob your zombie and how I'm not comfortable with him being here? I picked a when I do smite undead, I don't want to get your guy. So like we'll do all that. I'll gladly work with somebody and go through all that stuff. But honestly, there are times when I've gone so far down where I'll be like, do you want to just get your foot in? Like, do you not need a campaign or anything? You just want to get your foot in role playing. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, here's a die. Let's tell a story together. And there won't be a system. There won't be anything. It's literally roll a die, beat this number. I want to do this thing. Roll a die, beat this number. And like, because a lot of people are, can be intimidated with all that stuff. But when you realize that most of this is just collaborative storytelling, like all the other stuff is set dressing for the collaborative storytelling. And so it's why one of the more interesting systems that I like to bring some new role players to is Fantasy Flight created the End of the World series. And character creation in that is you are playing yourselves. The whole concept of that system is you all came to game night just in time for the apocalypse of the month to show up. And so I have the Wrath of God one where it's basically it's Ragnarok. It's every legend of Norse mythology, the end of the world is happening outside right now. And so like character creation there's some fun stuff to do the math, but there's also like your inventory is what do you have in your pockets? Which is also fun because if I do that to somebody, I try not to tell them that that's what the case is, because then you show up and guys have like the combat knife and make sure their phone is at 100%, because yes, when you roll up with your phone is at like 20% battery, your phone in the game has 20% battery. So they'll like charge everything up. They'll I happen to have brought my first aid kit in case anybody. I'm like but yeah, and so it's a lot of fun just recently I've been talking with a handful of people who've been doing role-playing games for a long time, and the advice that pretty much all of us give is pick one. No matter what system you want, no matter what setting you're looking for, pick one, because it's gonna be confusing. Like I've been role-playing since I was 16. I get a new system, I'm still confused, because I don't know all the rules and I don't understand how to do it. So that's why most of my setting books are all from the same setting. They're all from the same system, I mean, because I know that system.
Yeah.
Like I'll tell you, I said earlier that I love the Cypher system. The Cypher system, I have 5 books for the Cypher system, all just setting books, because I know that system and I like that system. I also have D&D because people just expect D&D. I also like D&D, but it comes down to just picking one and just doing it and figuring it out and whatever. Like, Star Wars is a big one that people are like. There's like 3 or
Yeah.
4 different available Star Wars role playing
Yes.
games out there. So I'm just like, even if you want Star Wars, you have to just end up picking one.
Yes. I have a really old one somewhere around my house.
Probably West End Star Wars.
I
if
think
it's the
it is
old one.
West End. Yeah.
If it's the old one, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just pick one and get it and play around with it and mess around. If you try to figure out like all the ins and outs and what's the best and everything, you're just going to get lost in the weeds and you're never going to actually play. So you just pick one and you can get your buddies who also want, and just pick one.
So if you're in a situation and you go, I'm not sure what the rule is for this, what do you do? Do you spend 15 minutes looking it up? What do you do?
To be fair, sometimes I will get a book if I know exactly where to look it up. Like if I know it's in this section, it's a couple pages into this section, give me a sec, then I will. But if it's like, man, where's that again? There have been many times where I've just been like, it's this. I don't care.
It's like pronouncing an odd name in the Bible. Say it with confidence.
Say it with confidence. It's this. You can be horribly wrong, but just roll with it. Like in this moment, in this time and place, it is this, and we're gonna, as long as we're in this time and place, it's this.
Well, it's been great talking to you. Before we wrap up, let me ask you a couple of real quick questions.
Absolutely.
Number one, what is your favorite system to play personally?
The Cypher system from Monte Cook Games.
Okay.
It particularly, there are still some books that a dear friend of mine got me via Kickstarter because I kept saying, "Oh, it's so pretty," but I couldn't afford it. So, but that also means I haven't gotten a table to play those games yet. Like there's one that's called We're All Mad Here. It's a fairy tale version of the Cypher system, and I can't wait. But the setting that I've had the most experience with in the Cypher system is called Numenera. And the whole concept of Numenera is it's Earth, like our Earth, but 1 billion years in the future. And the whole concept is that is the 9th world. We are the first world. There have been 9 entire civilizations that have risen and fallen to get to where they are now. Not all of them human. And so you're talking about it, the old phrase, I want to say it was Arthur C. Clarke who said it. I can't remember. One of those big names of science fiction said that technology will advance so far that it will eventually become magic.
Magic, yes.
That's what you're experiencing in Numenera.
Gotcha.
And some people are better at using the technology. Some people aren't. Some people just hit things. But but the thing I love about Numenera is it's not as tied down to class. So there are really just 3 classes. And it's basically the strong person, the smart person, and the person who can do a little bit of everything. But even then, you can make a smart, strong person. The glaive is the kind of warrior person. You can make that, you can build that person where their statistics are very much intellect driven and still make a viable character. So like I love playing with that. I love writing in that world. It's fun. I have a habit of using my favorite, my pocket favorite thing that they created, which is called the Iron Wind. The Iron Wind is something that exists. It is a bunch of nanomachines that have gone mad. And they literally just go around the planes rewriting the genetic code of anything they pass.
Nice.
And so I love playing with the Iron Wind. I love just over the top, crazy technological stuff. I love just everything about the world. I love the idea. I've actually toyed with it. I haven't gotten it to table yet, but I toyed with the idea of rolling a character, and it would take the right group. But because it is actual Earth, just super far down the timeline, I wanted to have kind of like a Josiah moment where somebody discovers the Bible. But it's this, instead of it being like a book, it's like a piece of tech, and it's in a language that they don't know. But so they're like they have this side thing, like part of the thing is to parse the words and understand what's going on in it. Because again, I like the idea of being able to play with new tech and rediscovered old tech, and the idea of it's Earth, but it's so drastically different over time. And for me personally, I just love the idea of playing with the sovereignty of God in a world that really doesn't know that he's there, because
Nice.
the whole idea is that when you're that far along the timeline, like people don't even begin to know what the world was like that far back. So, but yeah, as far as my favorite, definitely.
I can definitely tell. What is your least favorite system that you have played?
My least favorite system that I've played, I'm going to get killed. I'm going to have to, get a bodyguard. If you take D&D in its entirety and not breaking it, 4th edition, I don't like anything about 4th edition D&D. Not because it's bad. I want to be very clear to clarify that. Not because it's bad. It's not what I want D&D to be. If you I want to go and kill the dragon, 4th edition is great, because it's a much more tactical, let's spend 3 hours doing a combat game. I'm like, I want to tell the elaborate story of my people. D&D 4th edition was awful. there's this much of this book, of the 4th edition book, that was dedicated to like interactions and social stuff and setting. About that much of the book was about how you hit things. So if you don't lump all of D&D together, 4th edition hurt me. If you do just take all of D&D is not my least favorite. That would be Pathfinder.
Yes, you often need a bodyguard for some people.
Often referred to as math grinder. And again, none of this is about how bad of a system it is.
Yeah.
It is about, what does this system do for you?
It's not the system for you. It
is not the system for me. That's why I joke about I'm going to get killed. Like, lots of people love Pathfinder, especially because they're just coming out with a new version coming out, like 2.0 coming out soon. But I went into that because it was what my boy Jeff was playing, and I rolled in and I'm like, I see the arguments that people make, that having all these, fine grain rules of this plus this and do this, it gives you a level of customization that a lot of other systems will not let you do. And if that's your jam, that is awesome. I would be like, I want to do this. And I would have to spend 8 minutes looking over my stat block, even though I just did something similar last turn, looking it over. How many dice do I roll for this? What are my bonuses in this situation? Do I get this bonus or this bonus? I just didn't care. I was like, I'm so thankful that the game of Pathfinder I played was a play by post, which means that we were on a forum and you would write everything out, because that at least let me do what I do. Because if I was doing that at a table and I was just going like, I do this, that experience would have been terrible for everyone. Because I literally, I lost track of the number of times I messaged Jeff and I'm like, dude, here's my stat sheet. Tell me how many dice do I roll for this? What is my bonus? Is this a crit? I think it's a crit. And what do I do? I lost track. I am not a numbers guy. I'm not a min-maxer. I don't crunch. I avoid crunch. And that was an awful experience for me.
Okay, so another question is there a kind of weird and out there game mechanic or system that you have at least, maybe you haven't played it, but you know about it, that you're like, this is just one of the weirdest things and people should at least know about it?
Weird is a very subjective term.
Well, I'm thinking I know like Fear uses a Jenga tower instead of dice as a mechanic.
Bringing up games like Dread and what was the other one? There's a couple of them that use a Jenga tower,
Yeah.
And that one's great. When you roll up to somebody who only has a very limited role playing experience, and then you drop that Jenga tower in the middle of the table, that is a sight to behold. They're like, "What is this, and what does it have to do with our game?" For those who might not be initiated in that wonderful game, it's often just a one shot game. You're not playing like
Yeah.
a year's worth of Dread. You're basically in a horror movie, and instead of rolling a die, you'll say, "I want to do this." And the person running the game will tell you, okay, that's a 1 pull, 2 pull, or even 3 pull move you just made. You have to pull from the Jenga tower successfully that many times for your action to go through. By the time you're done, it's not a question of if someone's going to die. It's
just
when
when.
and how bad. Because at some point, no matter where you are, no matter what action you're trying to do, if you try to make a pull and that tower goes down, somebody died. Something truly horrifically terrible just happened. So I love that. There are some that just I don't know, like everything's if you're only expecting dice to be rolled, then there's lots of amazing stuff out there. I enjoy there's a game called Reflection.
Mhm.
And which is great. It's only a 2-player. It's a 2-player GM-less role-playing game, and you are basically and like each person is playing one member of this. They're either family or dear friends, and you are reenacting how they went from being close to betraying each other to the moment before they have a duel to the death.
Mm.
And how you play that game out determines how many dice you roll at the end of the game to determine who lives and who dies.
Wow.
So the only dice you roll is at the end to determine who won.
Hmm.
And I've had some truly amazing experiences with that game because of the fact that to not go too into the weeds of it, if you just you have goals that you're trying to accomplish in these scenes. If you succeed, you get dice. If you don't succeed, if you don't accomplish it within the scene, and it's all honor system, you're playing together, you get what's called hatred dice. As in, you have a growing hatred of it. This is not just personal, or this isn't just, business of betrayal. You honestly hate this person for what they've done. At the end of the game, you can choose to roll just your normal dice, or you can roll hatred dice, which gives you more dice to pull from, but may give you a lesser result because you are just pure hatred running through you. The best time that I ever had with that game, and it's intense. It's not for everybody. The best time was I looked up, because the person I was playing with asked, like, what happens if you roll a tie? And I'm like, well, you have to roll the same number and the same number of that number. There is mechanics for that, but who's going to do that? The likelihood that that's going to happen is so rare. And we got to the end. It was a general's son and his adopted son, basically like his second in command, who became like an adopted son.
Mm.
We rolled the same. I think it was like 3 6s for both of us.
Ow.
And I'm like, we both died. And there's also this, it's fun in that game because there's like ritual to it, because you create like what happened at the scene. And that literally, the setting that we had for that final, like right before we do the duel, we were actually standing over the grave of this man who was our father. And it came to blows, and we both ended up dying. We had this image of these two men who were there to seeking the honor and approval of their father, who is dead now. And instead of fighting for his honor, both his sons were dead and their blood was on the grave. And the crazy thing is that when you're playing this, it says that whoever dies, you have to take their character sheet and rip it in half and hand it to the other person, saying they have successfully beaten you. So we had this moment where both of us were just like, real slow, ripped those character sheets and just laid it on the table. And we were silent for like 20 minutes after that, because it was just so intense and crazy. Wow. So like, I love that stuff. There's a game inspired by a movie that was important for my teenage years. The name of the game is Damn the Man, Save the Music. If you've ever seen the movie Empire Records,
Okay, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
it's basically Empire Records, the role-playing game. It requires you to create a set list.
Nice.
You have to create a set list for your character.
Oh my goodness.
So people are doing crazy things. I literally just backed a Kickstarter from a guy who I've followed a lot of his stuff. He used to be a podcaster. Now he's designing games. He's a teacher. Travis Hill. He actually has a company called Presspot Games. It's all like zine stuff. So it's all like, black and white, whatever. I can't remember the exact name of it. It's like This World Is Not Yours or something like that. It's a game where one person is playing the family and the generations of this family that live in the house, and the other person is playing the house.
Nice.
He pitched that on Twitter, half joking, half serious. And I'm like, Travis, if you make this, I am backing day one. Like, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the mechanisms look like. If you tell me I'm going to play as the house, I want to do that. I don't know what that looks
fun.
Like.
That actually does sound fun.
Yeah, and then there's also a lot of people who are doing crazy stuff with solo role-playing games. I want to remember the one that was from there's some board game reviewers called Shut Up and Sit Down. They're out of England, and they did a whole thing of solo games. And one of them it's the 1,000-Year-Old Vampire. And you are literally telling the story. It's a book, and you're basically, the whole concept is that you are writing the journal of this 1,000-year-old vampire. But not only is that in and of itself fun, but like, you live so long, you start forgetting stuff. And so you literally go back and like redact prior entries because you have forgotten the truths of what that was in the past. You've forgotten it.
Nice.
Like, and you do some terrible things in them. Like, yeah. Especially if you get into indie role-playing games, people are doing people are doing just crazy stuff, and I love to see it.
Very cool. Well, I know that you have to leave here in just a minute, so tell us where we can find Mike Perna and what we need to check out.
The vast majority of everything is at inroadsministries.com. That's INN roadsministries.com, because we leaned heavily into the trope that whether you've played a role-playing game in video games or on paper, at some point you go to the inn to meet the mysterious stranger by the fireplace who's going to give you a quest. Tolkien did it, and it was everybody else has too. So we leaned heavily into that trope. You can find pretty much everything there. We have a Facebook group, which recently had a name change because we used to just call it The Tavern. But the problem with calling it The Tavern is that everybody who has a local bar called The Tavern tried to be part of our Facebook group. And it was just giving the admins a headache that even though we have a question that says, do you realize this is a a board game and role-playing game group and not an actual bar, they would say yes, and then they'd be like, oh yeah, I really loved the fried chicken or whatever. I'm like, so we eventually called it the Wandering Bard Tavern. That's on Facebook. We also have a handful of podcasts in various forms. Like I said, mine that is currently running, I literally just released the newest one yesterday. It's the Bard and Bible. It's the weirdest Christian devotional you're ever going to experience, because it takes place in my fantasy world. I have a lot of fun doing that, and it's both. To give the short version, there's a intro where it's like you're literally talking to like the dwarf bard version of me that welcomes you into the tavern called the Bard and Bible. It relates somehow to what we're doing, and then I look at a piece of scripture, and I specifically do what I referred to as a narrative hermeneutic. I'm literally just reading it as it's a story. I'm pulling application. I'm doing that stuff, but I'm not going with the intention of making application, because I've discovered that a lot of times scripture, the application there is just God saying, I want you to know who I am more after reading this than before.
Yeah.
And so I don't go in with the cute devotional thought of like, what can I do to encourage you today? I'm literally like, this is what this text is. And so it's led to some really interesting moments,
Letting
especially
the Bible speak for what it is.
Yeah. And it's amazing what happens when you do that.
Yep.
Um,
Totally agree.
yeah. So that right now I asked my patrons what book I should go. I wanted to go story by story through a book, and my patrons love me and hate me because because the vote came back. We want you to go through the book of Genesis. So I'm like y'all realize it's going to take me a while, right? But so I just released chapter 13 of Genesis, and super looking forward to the next episode where I have to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. Really looking forward to that. But that's a fun time. I also mix in some other stuff. There's things called the Bard Project, which is biblical articulation read deliberately, where I read stuff that isn't necessarily from the Bible, but I read it with the appreciation for what it is. Like the first one I did for that was the ending monologue from The Great Dictator.
Mm.
There's some of that. I haven't had time to do a lot of those lately, but there's a handful of them available. I have a growing number, as in I have 2 because they take a long time to put together. What I call parables, which is, like I said, this takes place in my fictional world. When I started this project, it was, I didn't intend on doing this fictional world, but it kind of happened organically. It went from, I want to do a devotional podcast to, hey, this is a cute framing device where I welcome you into a tavern, to I now have documents about the cosmology of the 9 realms and the history of them, all the different races that are involved. I have all of that. And so I literally rewrite Bible stories in my world. So the Good Samaritan became the Good Orc, and that sort of thing. And I have a ton of fun with it. I get a full voice cast. I recruit some people, and we do a full cast dramatic reading. They're a ton of fun. I wish I could do more of them. And then the other podcast, which I've only resigned to the end here because it's kind of been on extended hiatus due to COVID related shenanigans.
Imagine that.
It's like that has some kind of big impact on the world.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So it's called Game Store Profits.
Yes.
Hopefully we're going to be gearing up to start that up again soon, as some things have changed in my existence, at least temporarily. Hopefully Daniel and I can get back to the mic soon. But even if we don't, there are about 230 episodes in the back catalog of us talking about games and God and how they kind of overlap. And you can definitely experience the look of a podcast, because if you listen to episode 1, and then you listen to the episodes that happen after that, you'll see as we become more confident, our gear becomes better. And all the things that happen after a podcast has been around for a significant amount of time.
Well, Mike, it has been great having you. I know you have to run. Definitely check out inroadsministries.com, and that's INNroadsministries.com. Mike, once again, thank you so much for being on the show.
You had me come talk about games and Jesus. I mean, these are 2 of my favorite things. So, I mean, I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely. It was great talking to Mike about how he and Inroads Ministries are impacting people with the gospel through the use of role-playing games. I put links to Inroads Ministries sites down in the show notes, so go check those out. And I've also included some other links about role-playing games, some resources and products that you might be interested in. Definitely go check out the show notes. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, click all those links down there. That way you can keep up with us as we create new content. You can find all of our social links and links to the YouTube channel and our online store at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. If you enjoy the show and want to help even more, consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. We've changed all of our Patreon levels, and every level has great benefits and makes a huge difference in the ministry we're able to do. Supporters will also get to hear exclusive stories of believers we're serving around the world through our ministry partners. To check it out or to partner with us, go to patreon.com/ChristianNerdsUnite or ChristianNerdsUnite.com and click support in the menu. And don't forget to check out ChristianNerdHQ.com for more great podcasts just like this one. Before you go, I want to leave you with this one last scripture. 2 Corinthians 13:11-14. Finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice. Strive for full restoration, encourage one another, be of one mind, live in peace. And the God of love and peace will be with you. Greet one another with a holy kiss. All God's people here send their greetings. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. We'll see you next week.